Okay, today's video we're going to cover the RPR glute test. I've done this before. The other things we're going to cover is the toe glute reflex sequencing, the global neurological sequencing, and the opposite of that is the primary neurological compensation pattern. So with that being said, what we have a video of here is a coach covering the RPR test at a conference, and you can see the first athlete he actually checked had a strong glute firing pattern, and we'll cover the test soon.
See what happens. Face down, chest down. Ready? I want you to lift your leg up, straight up. I'm just gonna see if she's okay. Ready? Hold. She's on. I gotta get somebody that's not working.
So what happened there was it's actually me. I just ran a brief test, and this test you can see, you can find it on my YouTube page. This will cover it also, and I add a little bit, a few other things into this test, just some educational purposes, so you can watch either or. If you want to get a different version of it, just search or click on this link. I'll have it below the video on the YouTube page. Look at parts 1, 2, and 3. It's just a method of how to test somebody, see if they have these patterns. So getting back to the test, and we'll follow along as this the video goes.
Do you do RPR? Not this morning? Well, huh? Let's go. Come on, let's up here. Perfect. Sorry, but you're ready to roll. You are ready to roll. Yeah. All right, ready? Lift your leg up. Hold. Okay, we'll take her. Her glutes aren't on. Other tests. So what I do is I bend the knee so the hamstring comes out. And
so what I'm saying here with this glute test is that if you bend the knee, and on the first test she had her knee straight, a little bit straight, but I kind of knew she was on. So this test here for this coach, you're bending the knee so that the hamstring is taken out of the hip extension pattern, if it tries to. So what you can have is somebody do this test with a bent knee, fail it, and you have them hold their leg straight, which allows them to use the hamstring for hip extension. And then what happens is they can test strong. So I'm giving you this background because the people at this clinic had this background yesterday.
I have them lift their leg up, and then what happens is I push the leg down, and I'll put my hand here to stabilize a little bit for them. And then when I push down, she should be able to hold me. Like a small athlete should be able to hold me off the table with this big glute muscle. Ready? Lift up, hold. And she's just dropping, you can see. Ready? Hold. So there's nothing there. Well, it's like a 2. We'll give her a 2 today. Out of 10. Out of 100. No, we're going out of 2. Okay? So I really want you to work on resisting me. So, okay, if she's strong, doesn't move. Glute pattern's correct that we talked about yesterday. Glute, hamstring, QL.
So what we're showing here is the correct pattern. So when I said that, the glute initiates hip extension, the hamstring then gets involved, and then final is the QL for stability, so that you actually don't rotate. Because if this QL fired, you would rotate when you walked and run too much, swivel at the hips, I should say. This is the correct pattern. Now, I know people have asked me, they've found that when people are running, the hamstring's already on. Yes, these muscles most likely are already on. Because if you're running and this hamstring didn't activate until you started hip extension, your knee would blow out when you strike the ground. What we're saying is that this is the primary initiator of hip extension. All these muscles are probably on. And there's no switch on and off in these muscles. They do have a certain level of tonus in them, during almost all activity. Going back to the video.
What happens if the hamstring is the key indicator? Remember, I've just taken the hamstring out. So when I go to push, she collapses.
And what just happened there was we basically have a pattern. The reason her leg fell was because, remember, her hamstring is a primary hip extension initiator. And when we bend the knee in the test, basically the hamstring, the test will drop. Okay, the leg will drop. And then what takes place is when this athlete works out, if this is the primary pattern for hip extension, they get tight hamstrings, they eventually get hamstring pulls, they also have tight calves, and there's a few other things which we cover in our course that you can take a look at. Getting back to the video.
Got it? That means she's a hamstring QL glute pattern. The last one we talked about was the QL, hamstring. I do the same thing, lift up. I really want you to stop me. Ready? Hold. Did you see how that shoulder came off the ground right there? Watch. Hold. She tries to stabilize with this shoulder, it picks up. So now, her bad hip extension pattern, she starts here with a QL. It's actually not that bad, but you can see her starting to pick up her shoulder.
So with this extension pattern that I referenced here in the video, is now instead of the hamstring like on the previous one, if the leg just drops, if you go to push the leg down in the glute extension hip extension test, and her opposite shoulder, and I'll replay that video a little bit when you see it, but you can see her shoulder on all the tests actually started coming up over here. So this tells me she's a QL dominant pattern of her primary neurological compensation pattern. Okay, so what this athlete can look forward to is a tight back during performance. A lot of times when they're running, their back's the first thing to tighten up, or they're working out. And this is potentially future disc problems because all this tissue in here becomes compressed. Another sign of this actually is if you check the gap between your top rib and the hip bone. I usually like 4 fingers, but when you check that and you have this pattern, sometimes people have no fingers, 1 fingers. I've even seen a few cases where the ribs are tucked inside the hip bone. But this is the pattern you just saw for that testing. Heading back to the video.
So when I test this, I know I just found out. So all I do, come on in, lift up, ready, hold, and I see that. I know that she's that bad pattern.
Let me play that again.
I just found out. So all I do, come on in,
watch this.
Lift up, ready, hold, and I see that. I know that she's that bad pattern over here.
So if she was a hamstring, usually what happens, the shoulders stay there and the hamstring drops. This leg may drop no matter what, but when you push on this leg, you're testing for both these patterns at once. When you push on this leg and it drops, you know the glute's not working. So the global sequencing is off. And then you're basically looking at this shoulder to watch this test drop. If this knee drops and this shoulder doesn't really move, you know it's a hamstring pattern. And then, but you saw in all the tests that her shoulder would try to pick up. So it told us that this QL was locking down to try to extend the hip. It runs up from the lats and is tied to the shoulder.
Here, we can fix it really quick. Ready? I want you to lift this side up. Ready? Lift. She's trying to cheat a little bit, but that's fine. You can cheat. Ready? Lift up. Hold. That one's a little better. I like the glute on that. So this side glute's pretty good. We can make it better. All right. This side glute isn't the correct firing pattern. Okay. So without doing any intervention, I'm going to show you how powerful the toe is. This is why we do it on our exercises. I'm going to have her curl the big toe, nice and low. Yep, curl it in. Lift up. Ready? Hold. Hold.
Okay, I'll back up a little bit here. And
lift up.
What I reference is this toe reflex sequencing. And what we do here is we basically curl the big toe down. Basically, the big toe would grab the ground if she was standing there. Engages the toe glute reflex sequencing model that we talk about and I reference for years now. Roughly about 7 years ago, I started talking about this. I do this with all hip extension exercises to some level. When I say some level, that means the activation of the foot. Again, we use with almost every exercise, and really what we're looking at here is this is the Babinski reflex. We're tying the Babinski reflex into training. Okay, so you can look up the Babinski reflex, but this is essentially what we're talking about at this. Now you can see how this affects the test, but to turn the glute on, we do this in our exercise.
Hold. It's pretty crazy, isn't it? I just fixed that glute pattern. So I'm telling you, all your athletes, if you squeeze that big toe when you do your exercises, you're going to drive home that pattern. It's crazy. Lift your toe down, ready, lift up, hold.
So the toe is lifted up in the wrong, different direction. The toe would be pointing down now, and you saw she failed the test.
Lift your toe, squeeze it.
The toe activated the right global sequencing pattern. You can see her expression, how surprised she is.
Trick, this is a reflex to drive that pattern home. I'm going to summarize this toe thing on my YouTube page in the next week. But everything I do ties into this. Got it? So, flip over real quick. You didn't sign up for this, but you okay with me doing some RPR? Okay. Yeah. Ready? So let me show you what RPR does. Breathe. There you go. So what I'm doing is hitting the glutes in RPR right now. This is not the glutes. This is the neck, right? I'm right underneath the skull. And I'm just hitting this. I'm doing it so I don't have to coach her through. Normally she could fix it herself, and I go right behind the jaw. People ask me, why does this turn the glutes on? The thought is, babies, glutes are extension patterns. The thought is babies' first extension pattern is to root for food, which is the extensor muscle back here. We hit this, turns the other extensor on. The second extension pattern is what, as a baby? Open your mouth to feed. If you can't do those, you're not going to make it. Okay. You all right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you for letting me torture you there. Flip over. Don't use your toe now.
So the toe's pointed down. She's not curling it to turn the glute on with the Babinski reflex. You can see what happens.
Lift up, a little higher. No, I meant she can go higher now. Ready?
So she can lift her glutes even higher than she did before.
So she's not using her toe. RPR, just turn the glute on. Feel it? Hit the toe with RPR. Ready? Lift. See how high she's going before? Her extension pattern wasn't there. So people think, and there's multiple reasons, but people think if she wasn't running getting full extension, she's just slower than she could potentially be. Ready? Hold. Okay. You feel like you could hold that all day, don't you? Yeah. She wasn't shaking. It was crazy. That's it. And I have this on my YouTube page. You can test people to find out the bad patterns.
So getting to the main point here is with when is this toe glute reflex sequencing used? We use it on all hip extension patterns. When, it kind of depends. The athletes will actually figure it out themselves. This is something I don't overcoach because you can't have them think about this. Once they learn it, once they understand it, once it starts to happen natural, when they go to grab the ground and reverse, sometimes it happens right at hip extension. Sometimes it happens earlier because the glutes got to yield some of the forces. But then I always talk about this, especially in our course, is that all these glute exercises people want to focus on, if they have a neurological compensation pattern of a hamstring or a QL firing hip extension, and you do those in the weight room, but they walk with the wrong hip extension pattern, using their QL when they walk and their hamstring, you're just gonna you've everything you've done in the weight room, if you've done it correctly, is a complete waste of time. If they, let's say they took 10,000 steps of hip extension. So my point is that we have to coach people up to squeeze that big toe so that it works when they walk and they drive their hips forward. We talk about this in the RPR courses. Correct firing pattern. Obviously, here's a simple test. You can do an RDL. So if you want to get off your chair, do an RDL exercise. Do it the wrong way, in my opinion, with the toe. But basically, put the weight on your heels and only lift your toes up while you do your RDL. See how it feels. Do about 2 or 3 reps, and then the next 2 or 3 reps, I want you to go down with your RDL, fire the toe into the ground, grab it before you come up. And it can be slow down, pause, squeeze the toe, and then come up and see how it feels. You can see that it activates the glute. Look, I've talked many times about this. I do it on bench, I do it on squats, I do it on lat pull down. I don't tell my athletes to brace, because if the glute turns on and the hips are firing correctly, your core fires the way you're supposed to. I've seen many dysfunctions from core bracing. I believe out of surgery, and if you have dysfunction and your coach would tell you that, or a coach should know this, then bracing is important for safety. But eventually you need to get them out of focusing on bracing and let the bracing happen naturally. So again, we do this on bench, squat, single leg squat, squeeze your toe. You can see on a step up, a lot of people do a step up with a quad activation, where it should be the glute activating, the quad gets involved. Okay, lat pull downs, you can do more. Especially on plyometrics and reactive patterns. The plyometrics, your feet grab the ground. I've seen a lot of people come out of rehab with the wrong pattern. So this in rehab, this needs to be used. This toe glute um, sequencing needs to happen in rehab, so that when you get to athletes as a strength coach, that they are firing correctly. Okay, and I already talked about the ribs previously, but bracing. So coming soon after this video, I'll put it on YouTube. I'll talk about the extension arch method. It's part of the ankle rocker method. Chris Corfus brought this into my training a number of years ago, maybe 7 or 8, and this has been a game changer. And then I'll also do an individual video on the toe glute reflex sequencing that we just referenced in this video.